Hi, this is JP Morgan. We're live here on YouTube, bringing you all the things that are going on in the photo world right now, leading off with Canon makes lenses for Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos. For billionaires, lenses that only billionaires can afford. I guess they're going to sit on their SpaceX and take pictures of the moon, space junk, toilets floating by, whatever you have there. But Canon announces a new 800mm 5.6. It's an L series lens. These are truly incredible lenses, but they are incredibly expensive. It comes in at $16,999. I love that. $16,999. Like that $1 at $17,000 makes so much difference. You know? Oh yeah, it's $16,999. They are great lenses. I can tell you this, every time I've worked with bird people that are photographing birds, anytime I've worked with people who are out shooting, they're going 600mm is never quite close enough. They're putting on a 1.4 or a 2x converter. Well, here you have a 800mm 5.6, which is really a pretty fast lens. It truly is for an 800mm. It has an optical image stabilization. It stabilizes 4.5 stops. It will focus up to 8.53 feet, and that's pretty amazing with an 800mm lens. That's my distance, basically less than the distance from me to the camera here. It will focus that close, which really is great because if you're photographing birds or any kind of wildlife that you're getting small bits of wildlife, you want to get in really close, that's going to be really an advantage with this lens. And it really is about getting in close and getting close to birds and a lot of different kinds of animals. Okay, so that's the first one. It's 6.9 pounds. So comparatively speaking, think of the 800mm f11, which is $999. So this is a bit more expensive, but it's 2 stops faster. And that's significant. If you're shooting outside as the sun's going down, the scene getting a little darker, you're going to want that extra speed. So they also introduced the RF 1200mm f8. It's also an image stabilized lens. It's 7.4 pounds. It does also accept the 1.4, the 2x. So you can get this lens at 2400mm, which is pretty amazing with the teleconverters. But it does mean you're going to go from f8 to 11. So you're back up to 11, f11. No, actually on that 2x, it's going to be a little more than 11. It could be a stop and a half. So it's going to be closer between 11 and 16. So these are great lenses, great offerings. It is, I think, a lens that is very specialized. You're going to want to have the money. You're going to want to have these lenses to be able to come up with the money to afford them. Julian and I bought a couple of each, put in each one of our kits. Okay, not really. We didn't buy any of them. Those are very expensive lenses. I'll see if I can borrow Jeff's or Elon's. Maybe they can send one over this weekend that I can use on the slanted lens. That'd be awesome, guys. Send me a lens. That'd be excellent. I appreciate it. Speaking of things that are only made for 2 or 3 people, Panasonic just announced their GH6. So 2 or 3 people and Andy Cow, a great friend here of the slanted lens, DP that we've worked with over the years, who love the GH5 and truly loves that micro four thirds. So Panasonic has now announced a GH6. It's 25.2 megapixels, micro four thirds. It will shoot 4K at 60 frames at 10-bit 422, unlimited recording time, which is fabulous. At 5.6K, you can do 60p, 4K 120p. So, I mean, you have some pretty amazing options with that camera. My problem with micro four thirds is that it just looks like video too much. I mean, and when I say that, Panasonic has a beautiful picture, a beautiful color science. I like the looks. They really do have a great picture, but it's hard to get shallow depth of fields. You've got to be shooting lenses that are super fast to be able to make that work if you want to get any kind of shallow depth of field. And I think that's the biggest drawback. Plus, you don't have a really large image when you're done. It is definitely not a crossover camera in my mind. It's definitely and I'm sure they're going to get all kinds of people saying, no, it's an amazing crossover camera. So, hey, bring it on. If you have any questions, if you have anything you'd like to talk to us about, put them in the chat. We'd love to hear from you. Someone just said, what would you use those long lenses for? Birds, any kind of wildlife that you want to get close to something, but you can't get super close. I'm always struggling. I was shooting condors, California condors, just a month ago, and it was hard to get close enough. They're flying, even with a 600mm lens. I'm feeling like I'm not quite close enough. I would love to have had a 1200mm f8. I'd take it. You know, in the daylight, you can use that. As it starts to get towards evening or starts to get a little darker, that f11 is not going to work, and f8 is going to be pretty tough. You're going to be pushing your ISO. You're going to really be pushing your ISO. But great lenses that are coming out from Canon, and the GH6 was a great mirrorless camera. And moving on to kind of the state of where we're at. I think it's interesting. We are at the dawn of a new age. We're at the transition of all things photographic. Just like we went from film to digital, we're at the really DSLRs to mirrorless. And in that spirit of changing from one to the next, there's several things that are happening. Canon has, they have discontinued a majority of their EF lenses, prime lenses. But when I look at that list of prime lenses that they have discontinued, they really are lenses that are more like kit lenses, lenses that are not near as, they're not their L series lenses. It's kind of the kit lenses, kind of their lower line, but they're going to just quietly stop making a lot of these lenses, discontinue them, and move on. They're putting all their research, all their money into RF lenses. That's the direction that we're going right now. I also saw an article that said, is the Sony A Mount finally finished? Sony A Mount? What is this Sony A Mount? Hasn't it been gone forever? Yes, the Sony A Mount is done. We have moved on. We're now in the E Mount world. I don't see us looking back. Not looking back at all. I think we have moved on to E Mount completely. I don't think we'll be looking back to the A Mount at all. I think it's just, well, obviously we're not. We've already moved on. So there you go. Any questions there, Jolene?
Speed boost it?
Speed boost? Speed boost in relationship to what?
Canon lenses.
Oh, Canon lenses, speed boosted. You know what? Speed boosted is a great idea with that, with the 800 or the 1200. That's certainly going to help you to have a faster stop and make it much more workable outside. I'd love to test that and take a look at that using the speed booster, because if you can get a stop or even a stop and a half, I would think that's pretty amazing. And when you put, but probably, yeah, I think that's worth looking at. And I think that's certainly a way I would go if I purchased one of those lenses. If I bought the F11, I would definitely look at that as a way to be able to speed that lens up and be able to give me a much faster aperture, because you're definitely going to need it. All right, as we dawn on a new era, as we said, going from all of the mirrorless, all the DSLR to mirrorless, it really is, in my mind, I don't know why people are still complaining about the Z9, that it only has an electronic shutter. I've had this camera for the last 2 weeks. We've sent it back, just barely sent it back. It is a fabulous camera in so many ways, but it is really clear to me that you are not going to use mechanical shutters in cameras much longer. You know, when you had wooden wagon wheels and we moved into from wooden wheels to metal wheels and then to tires, you know, why would you say, well, I need an extra set of wooden wheels on my car just because if I get in trouble, I want to have the option to use wooden wheels. I'm going, well, the tires are a lot better. They're a lot faster. They can sync with strobes. They can also, give you 120 frames a second, which you cannot get with a mechanical shutter. They can do a lot of things. They can read fast enough where you're not getting any kind of movement in your imagery. It's just, I just don't understand why we're not looking forward. The mechanical shutter is going to go the way of the the lenses that we just talked about, and it's going to just disappear. So as far as the A mount lenses, the mechanical shutter is going to go the same way as the A mount lenses. So there you go. That's my sense about it. We have a full review of the Z9 coming out, which is a fabulous camera. And we're going to compare that with the A1 and just look at those two head to head and just see exactly how they compare with each other. Just a sneak peek on that thought. I was very impressed with the autofocus on the Z9, but I'm super impressed with the autofocus on the A1 as well. Great file size, image size, great video. Didn't have any issues with overheating what we used of it, but we didn't really push it very hard. The 8K looks fabulous, but you'll see that coming up real soon here. All right, I find this interesting. Any other questions, Jolene? Here's a comment.
My first mirrorless camera is a Sony A7 IV, and I have the trio of Tamron lenses and couldn't be happier. The total cost to acquire everything is very reasonable.
That is a very reasonable place to get into the market. You got an A7 IV, A7 IV or A7 III? A7 IV?
A7 IV.
Yeah, A7 IV. A7 IV with a trio of Tamron lenses is a fabulous way to get into the market. I think, quite frankly, the 35 to 150 that Tamron came out as a 228 is an incredible lens that kind of spans a gap in the middle of that whole trio that just makes that an incredible walk-around lens. Not just a walk-around lens, but it's a really professional, high-end lens that gives you just shallow depth of field, great image. So you're right. That A7 IV is a great camera with those lenses. It truly is a great way to get into the market. In a full frame with a great image size and great video, fabulous. I mean, isn't it crazy? We talk about $6,500 cameras like everybody's got one. You know, why don't you pick up two? You know, it just doesn't make any sense. We got lenses that are $16,000. The 1200 millimeter is $20,000. Oh, no. $19,999. It's not $20,000. It's $19,999. So that's a pretty expensive lens. Put that on a $6,500 camera and you're off you go. So, comments, questions?
Not right now.
Okay, so I'm going to move on here. It's interesting. Canon is planning on, I see this in the rumors and it makes perfect sense to me, an ultra high resolution mirrorless camera. So we've had the Canon 5DS, the 5DS R. Those have been around for a long time. And they've been incredible cameras. I know that Tricia Zemp, doing her all of her stop motion, has used the 5DS. Just a high resolution camera when she's doing her stop motion. She's not having to shoot fast frame rates because she's shooting a frame at a time. And that camera has become a workhorse for her. And it makes sense because you have such a large megapixel sensor. But other cameras now are catching up. A 45 megapixel sensor is not uncommon in flagship cameras for a lot of the manufacturers. So I think it makes perfect sense for Canon to come out with something that's a little higher megapixel. And I think somewhere in the 75, maybe 85, probably not, but 75 megapixel range and a high megapixel camera makes perfect sense for Canon. I think we will see that very soon here. That camera really becomes about landscape photography. It becomes about scientific photography, anything where you need a lot of detail. Macro photography could be very interesting with a camera of that kind of size. I would love that camera if it had a fast enough shoot rate, which it won't. But I love large megapixel sensors if I'm shooting, like doing the condors. I've got a crop way in. I love the ability to crop in, and that is super helpful when you got a large megapixel sensor. So I think we'll see if not a trio, maybe a R5S, yeah, very possible an R5S would come along and give us a large megapixel camera. It's not going to have a fast frame rate. It's not going to be a sports camera. It's not going to be a run and gun kind of shoot fast camera. It's going to be a more deliberate kind of camera. Anything, Jelaine?
Okay, this is off the subject of what you're talking about, but somebody's wondering about the FJ400 strobe.
So someone's asking about the FJ400 strobe. Go ahead.
With a Canon R6, can you use high-speed sync?
Absolutely. You can use the FJ400. You can use the FJ200 and high-speed sync with the R. Sorry, what was the question? What was that? With the which camera?
Can you use it? Can you use it with the R6?
Oh, yeah, with the R6. Yeah, absolutely. R5, R6. That strobe will sync with all those and high-speed sync. There's no doubt about it. I was just testing high-speed sync on the R5 not too long ago. I just tested it, high-speed sync, on the Z9. And the Z9, you had to do a couple of steps, and it's in a video that'll be coming out in order to get the high-speed sync to work. So it wasn't turnkey, as in, you know, you had to go into the menus and set it up to be able to do that high-speed sync. But once you set that up in the menus, on that Z9, it will high-speed sync, even with that electronic shutter. So, yeah, that absolutely works for us. Okay,
here's a video question. Since the camera company, not to be named, keeps suing people over Internet RAW, why isn't B-RAW being adopted faster?
Boy, that's a good question. I think it's a matter of, you know, people put money and direction into certain kinds of Kodak, certain kinds of direction in the market, and it starts to become a matter, you've got to build a market base around that product. You got to get people to be interested in that product. You got people that have got to respond to it, and it really needs to get to the tipping point. But I think we'll see that soon when people start responding, because you're right. It's got to become more of an open source, a way to be able to get that raw in the different cameras. So I hope we'll see that soon. Julian?
That's it for now.
Okay. All right, moving on here. I saw a sneak peek of the Hasselblad X2d. You know, I love the X1D. The X1D 250C, fabulous camera, beautiful picture. Enjoyed shooting that camera. Love the small compact size of it. Really enjoyed everything about that camera when it came to the color science and the image size. Oh, it's just absolutely beautiful. Did not enjoy the autofocus. It was very slow with the autofocus and kind of difficult to use in that way. If you're coming out with an X2d, I would hope that this is going to have something very much closer to a 100 megapixel sensor, closer to the GFX 100. And I'm thinking if we see that and an improvement in the autofocus, that could be a camera to be really to be reckoned with, because that's going to be a beautiful camera. The color was so nice on the 1DX. The X1D. I just think we'll see in the future a great comparison there if we get a 100 megapixel out of that new X2D. Man, I keep doing that today. It's been a long day. All right, so take a look at some of those pictures. It just needs better autofocus, and you're going to be competing with the GFX 100S, no doubt about it. All right. I thought it was interesting. I've seen several questions, and I want to address it really quickly here. Several questions about the R5 and the R5C, and people are going, I'm not really sure how, the difference in these two. They are very different cameras. There's absolutely no doubt about it. The R5 is a small, just a normal kind of mirrorless or DSLR type body, whereas the R5C is that stacked body with the larger battery compartment built in on the bottom. It's got a fan on the back, so it's got a deeper fan box on the back, which gives you the ability to have a fan that's going to keep it from overheating. And it is very much a cinema camera. When you switch from video to stills, it brings up different menus. It brings up just everything switches to a more of a basic kind of Canon cinema camera type menus and look versus when you go into the R5 just as a still camera, it goes back to your normal kind of still camera menus, and it's very, very different. So just clarification on that. It's a very different camera. I think you're going to see a very different kind of user with the R5C. I think if a person is just into stills and they want great stills, they shoot weddings, they shoot, just beautiful stills, and they're not really interested in video, then the R5C is not for you. There's no doubt about it. But if you do crossover work, the R5C will be a great camera. It is large if you're hauling it, and you have to, do stills. You're going to carry that around all day. It's a much larger camera, and I think if I was doing weddings or things, it wouldn't be a camera for me. It would just be too large a form factor and wouldn't make sense. But if I was doing wedding videos, that would make more sense, and that would be a much better camera for that application. So just a couple of thoughts about the R5, R5C. I hope to do a complete review of that coming up real soon, and we should see that coming real soon. Okay.
Just a comment about high-speed sync again.
Yes.
High-speed sync is nice, but it eats more battery life than adding an ND with flash without high-speed sync.
That's something I should test. So I don't know if you heard the question or not, but it's saying that it eats more battery life. The reality is that if you have a certain amount of power and you're going to strobe that several times, pop, 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 you're using the same amount of power as when you give one large pop. And so that battery use, in my mind, is going to be very similar, because when you go to high-speed sync on an FJ400, you're not going to get as much power out of that strobe because it's having to fire 4 times. It can't give you the entire amount of power out of that strobe head 4 times fast enough to be able to sync with the shutter. So it's got to take that maximum amount of exposure, maximum amount of power, and it's got to break it into 4 parts or 5 parts or whatever, how many parts it breaks it into. So my experience has been, you can check it out on our lesson that we did on ND filters versus high-speed sync, is that you get very similar look with an ND filter and high-speed sync, because you're going to give more power out of your strobe because you have to use that to be able to see through that ND. But you go to high-speed sync and you're using that power, just breaking it up. So I don't think it's going to save more battery. Probably people out there that will argue with me on that. And if it does, it's not going to be as significant as you might think. I shoot on the FJ400s, high-speed sync. My word, we shoot on them. We shot stuff for headshots all day long one day, and I think we changed the battery once, and we're shooting multiple, I mean, just over and over again, hundreds of images. Maybe we changed the battery a couple times, but I'm not so sure we did. I was super pleased with how long they lasted, and it's never been an issue for us at all.
Okay, here's another comment.
Go ahead.
Since I mainly do video projects and have a few aperture 300Ds, would you recommend using continuous lighting, or should I buy strobes to get into the photo side of things?
I get this question often and have very distinct perspective about it. If you really have 300Ds are great lights, they're very powerful. They won't overpower the sun. In fact, it's hard to do an interview outside where you have a person even in the shade to get the light bright enough on their face so that the background doesn't become a problem. So my sense about when you go to strobes is you have complete control of the situation. You can overpower the sun. You can use high-speed sync to be able to overpower the sun. You can give a strong enough light on the person to be able to balance in the shade to out of the shade. If you really are serious about being a professional photographer, you have to use strobes. You really do. LEDs make no sense whatsoever. They just don't do the same thing, and they do not do it as effectively. They're great for video. They work for video. That's what they're for, but they don't give you the options you get in photography. In photography, you have greater control of the sun, greater control of lighting situations. So if you have to come in and light something and make it happen now, you can make it happen with a strobe head and without a huge crew. Whereas if you come with LEDs, well, a 300D is not going to be bright enough. Maybe we got to set up 3 of them. Maybe we have to get 5K. Now you got to get a crew of people. And in order to give yourself the same options you get with a strobe head, you're going to have powerful LEDs and probably several people to help you set them up, move them around, and make it happen. So if you're doing still photography, strobes is definitely the way to go. There's no question about it. And lithium battery strobes that you can move around that are portable, so that you have the ability to run and gun and not have to plug in the wall. Even if you're inside, you don't want to have to run a cord. You just have the ability to set up and shoot. And I think that makes them so valuable. It really is the way to work. The only downside for me with all the lithium battery strobes out there is they're all monoblocks, which means they're fairly heavy up on top of a stand. And I tell my students all the time, if you have a FJ400 on a stand with a softbox outside, it will blow over every time. So will any strobe that's on that stand, because it's got a lot of weight up on the top. So use a sandbag. That's all you have to do to solve that problem, and it'll solve it every time. And so that's what I do. I just bag them, and that makes them so they work flawlessly. That's the only downside, I feel like, with strobes. I think the FJ200s are pretty incredible because you can do a lot of things with those. A small kit of 3 of them is fabulous. You get a key light, or you get a key, a rim, and something on the background. It just makes it so easy to work. And I think those FJ200s make it a really fabulous way to work and to shoot. So I went long-winded on that one, didn't I?
Back to cameras. For astrophotography, would you recommend Sony A7 IV or Canon R6?
Oh, definitely not the A7 IV versus Canon R6 for astrophotography. The only reason I say this, A7 IV, is that you just need, I think you need the larger megapixel size. You truly do. I think it's going to give you a much better image, and it's going to be significant. I think it's significant. Canon's coming out. We've had rumors. They're coming out with something between the R6 and the R5. I'm not sure what that's going to look like, but I have a very good guess that it's going to have a somewhere in the 30s megapixel sensor to compete better with the A7 IV. I think they have to do that in order to make it very competitive. But I think right now, if I were doing the two, I would definitely do the A7 IV. That's my sense about it. Not that I don't love the R6. I do. I love Canon. I love Canon color. I have Canon cameras. I'm really frustrated with how Canon has positioned itself. I don't understand it a lot of times. I'm like begging, please, just understand the market. The one thing I can tell you about Sony is that they listen to their consumers, and they try to give more than they promise to their consumers. Canon does not seem to be that same responsiveness. They don't have that same responsiveness. They are much more about what works for them rather than what works for their consumer. But I think they make incredible cameras. I have a C200. I'll probably buy the R5C. Probably no doubt about it. So I do love their cameras. I just wish they would respond a little better to the people who use them.
Okay, another question here. With the Canon R6, what's the best all-around lens?
Best all-around lens for Canon R6, I always tell people out of the gate, a 24-70 2.8 is a great lens for that R6. It's just a great place to start. It gives you a fairly wide, so you can do you can do anything from a landscape to a little bit of architecture, not quite wide enough for architecture, but to a 70, which is pretty good as far as portraiture goes. It's a little short, but that's a great starting lens. It really is a great starting lens. I love the fact that Tamron on their Sony mount has gone to 35 to 28, or no, 28 to 75. There you go, 28 75. So it's just a little longer, and that feels like a little more of a portrait lens, and I love that. So that's really my suggestion. If you do video, people love the 24-105. It's a great place to be in. 24-105 f4 for video is a great place to go because you get that 24-105, sorry, f4, because you get wide to a little bit of a telephoto. That's a great range for doing video, run and gun video. Love that lens. Just the f4 for stills doesn't let that background fall out of focus enough, and I think you're better off to get a 2.8. So I think a 24-70 is a great lens to get. And then the next one I'd get is a 70-200. Those would be the two first lenses I would get. I do love a 50-1.2 because you can get just beautiful shallow depth of field, and it looks fabulous. An 85 is excellent. Okay, they're all amazing. But know this, if you're getting into Canon, just buy those RF lenses because that's where everything's going. EF lenses are going to be discontinued. We're going to slowly see them disappear. I heard someone say the other day, EF glass is the future. I'm going, future of what? No, it's not. It's CRF. There's no doubt. All of the mirrorless lenses are going to be the direction. The market demanded it because of Sony leading out, and now that's where the market's headed, and it's not going to look back. Jelaine?
Yep, I'm here.
Nothing?
Nothing now.
Okay, moving on here. Sigma, there's been some patents that have been disclosed that people have found from Sigma. A bunch of lenses, 28-70 2.0. These are all full frame lenses. A 14-30, a 20 millimeter, 23 millimeter, 28, 33. I'm not sure what these are going to end up being on. I have some good guesses, but it's definitely going to be some kind of a mirrorless camera. It's going to be on one of the mirrorless platforms. I think we're going to see a whole offering from Sigma coming real soon. I really, truly do. And I think that's going to be getting them into the market. Hope to see Tamron get into that RF and Z market as well. Love to see those offerings come in the next year. All right, so there we have. Oh, I did want to mention, everyone knows quasars. Quasars are incredible lights. They're like basically LED tubes. You can take some of the original quasars, you can put them into a Kino flow, in the same housing as a Kino flow, but they're all LEDs, they're RGB, get different colors. But quasars come out with a what they call a rainbow or rainbow 2. These are a double wide, basically LED tube, and in one housing. And those are incredible lights. They have great RGB, clean whites. They're just a great light to be able to work with on set. People are used to these because if you're shooting and running, gunning, you can get these in corners. You can put them up in the ceiling. It's just easy to install and to use them. You can run them, from an app. It really makes it easy to be able to run these lights. Quasar is an incredible company. They really are taking all of the lighting industry and perfecting it and moving on. I'm not sponsored by them. I just think they make incredible lights. So I thought that was worth mentioning.
Okay, how come no one is talking about the A7 R4 61 megapixels?
How come no one's talking about the A7 R4 61 megapixels? That's a really good question. I mean, it is a great camera. It's a little slow when it comes to burst speed because of that larger megapixels, but it is certainly a beautiful frame. I've shot with the camera. I love the image that you get from it. It really is the thing that's holding the place as far as largest megapixel in a mirrorless camera. It's kind of in that place. It's holding that marker. Flagship cameras are getting closer to it, but they're really not going to hit it yet. And I think that's why Canon's going to come out with this new camera. They're going to come out with a larger camera that they can hit. The 5DS and the past are going to get that 75 megapixels. They're going to give you something that will go beyond the A7 R4. I think that's really the challenge, which means Sony is right behind them. You know, it's right behind them. I should test that camera again because I didn't love that camera when it came out. It just gives you a lot of detail, and I'll try shooting some birds with it and just see how, I mean, not shoot birds, photograph birds, obviously. All right. Any other questions, Julene?
That's it for now.
Because I'm wrapping it up. Hey, if you're interested in any of our downloads, get over to theslantlens.com, click on the store, and in the store, you'll find our downloads, everything from landscape photography to any type of portraiture, posing. There's some great downloads there. It'll help you to perfect your craft. Great stuff from Tricia Zemp on doing stop motion. Great, really probably the best information out there on stop. Well, absolutely no doubt about it. Best information out there on stop motion. We also have great stuff on food photography. So check that all out in our store. And thank you for listening. And everyone, keep those cameras rolling and keep on clicking. Elon, send me a lens.